In mid-9th century Byzantium, a former stable boy paraded through the streets carrying the severed head of the emperor who had raised him from absolute obscurity. The emperor, Michael III, had anticipated a betrayal. He just never expected it from his best friend. This is the brutal logic behind Law 2 of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. It is a paradox that has repeated across centuries. The exact relationships we rely on for safety and loyalty are frequently the ones most likely to trigger a collapse. Choosing familiar comfort over objective competence isn't just a personal misjudgment. It is a recurring historical trap that has dismantled empires, decimated armies, and bankrupted modern businesses. When Michael III took the throne, he was surrounded by schemers and assassins. Seeking someone he could trust, he turned to Basilius, a peasant who had once saved his life. Ignoring his qualified advisors, Michael promoted his inexperienced friend to the highest levels of power. As Michael poured wealth and titles into the relationship, the psychological balance shifted. Each new gift, intended to secure loyalty, actually increased the weight of the debt Basilius owed. Over time, that gratitude didn't grow. It became a burden that Basilius wanted to escape. Eventually, Basilius amassed more money, military allies, and Senate votes than the emperor himself. When Michael finally asked for a small loan to be repaid, Basilius's sense of obligation had vanished. A few weeks later, he watched as his soldiers stabbed the emperor to death. We see this same imbalance in the modern workplace. A manager promotes a friend based on a history of trust rather than current capability. But once in power, the friend begins to expect ongoing special treatment just because. They stop seeing their position as a reward for work and start seeing it as a right of the friendship, creating a toxic environment of entitlement. Handing unearned power to a friend rarely buys their loyalty. More often, it simply funds their future resentment. Contrast this with Emperor Sung of China. In 959 AD, Sung inherited a throne defined by a brutal pattern. Army generals would murder the emperor, take the crown, and then be murdered by their own military friends a few years later. Sung broke the pattern by neutralizing his dangerous military friends. He threw a banquet, got the generals drunk, and offered them massive estates and riches in exchange for their immediate retirement. He kept them wealthy, but far from power. While he sidelined his friends, he actively empowered his former enemies. When rival kings surrendered, Sung spared them and gave them significant roles in his court. He turned men who expected a guillotine into his most loyal vassals. In a workplace, a rival who is shown genuine respect and given a real opportunity will often work harder than anyone else. They have everything to prove, and they know their position depends on results, not history. Mercy shown to an enemy creates a debt of survival. In high-stakes environments, that is a far more reliable currency than the fragile, untested bonds of friendship. This logic explains why the most effective alliances are often built between people who dislike each other. When Napoleon's minister Talleyrand decided to turn against the emperor, he chose Joseph Fouché as his partner, a man who had previously tried to have Talleyrand assassinated. They were perfect partners because they owed each other absolutely nothing. Their alliance was stripped of emotional baggage, functioning as a single mechanism driven entirely by the shared goal of toppling Napoleon. Because there was no friendship to preserve, they could maintain a highly objective, results-oriented relationship. They focused on shared interests rather than shared feelings, which allowed them to successfully undermine the empire. Many business co-founders fail because they prioritize preserving their friendship over making hard choices. They avoid the brutal honesty required for success to avoid offending someone they like. True loyalty in these environments isn't found in how you feel about each other. It's anchored in how effectively you achieve a shared outcome. The symptoms of ignoring this law are recognizable in almost any organization: betrayal following a loyalty promotion, irritation from those you've helped unconditionally, the collapse of friendships when business gets hard, a fear of being honest with colleagues, and the shock of seeing a long-term ally turn against you. The underlying problem is that our minds don't handle long-term gratitude well. We often begin to interpret a favor as a debt, and over time, the burden of that debt becomes oppressive. This creates a toxic dynamic. The person receiving the favor eventually forgets the kindness and convinces themselves they earned their success entirely on their own merits, fueling resentment toward the person who helped them. Basilius didn't spend years plotting a master betrayal. He sat in unearned power until his obligation to Michael simply evaporated. Evaluate your inner circle. Are they there because they are the best for the job, or because you are afraid to work without the safety net of friendship? For a full breakdown of Law 2, visit the channel.